Do you have a player who's working really hard but is still struggling at the plate, chasing pitches out of the strike zone? Maybe they're getting jammed, rolling over, topping some pitches, hitting some weak infield pop-ups. Well, perhaps it's not their fault. Maybe it's in the way that they're going about their training. Hey, if I have your interest, please grab a pencil and paper, because today we're going to discuss the Complete Hitter's Blueprint. Hey, this is Coach Bill, and I'm glad you're with me here today. Today we're going to go over the Complete Hitter's Blueprint. And I just want to let you know, for those of you who don't know who I am, I've been around a long time, and I've helped hundreds of hitters reach the next level. I've helped coaches, I've helped players, I've helped parents. So I'm glad you're with me here today. We're going to go through the Complete Hitter's Blueprint. And in case you haven't, if you go into the description area, there's a spot in there where you can just click on a link. It'll take you where you can download a PDF, and you can write in the margins of it, but it will lay out today's class. Okay, so let's hop to it. And I want to start with this idea. What most players and coaches are unaware of is the idea that there's a speed gap in the hitter's brain. Okay, and what I mean by that is there is a speed, a range of speed, and it just depends on your hitter. Okay, so for those kids who are like 10 years old, that speed gap is about 3 to 5 miles an hour. Okay, if your player's like 11 to 13, that gap might be like 4 to 6. And if like it's a high school player or a college player, that gap might be as 5 to 7. And as you start to climb that ladder, that gap gets a little larger, right? I would say like a college guy's right here. That 9 mile an hour starts to look at a professional player. And then you get into those professional players, and that gap starts to look like 10 to 12, okay? And that's a pretty heady gap. And what do I mean by this? I mean the secret, the backstory, the information, the history that we need as we go forward here today, and how these things affect us as hitters. This means that from pitch to pitch, faster or slower, from pitch to pitch, if a pitcher can throw 3 or 4 or 5 mile an hour, faster or slower, to this 10-year-old, that 10-year-old's going to struggle to be on time, okay? And that's going to become a very, very key component to how we want to go about our hitting, okay? And that is understanding, what does it mean to be on time? What does it mean to get on time? And so when we start to look, 4 to 6, 5 to 7, those are typical for high school players, okay? Meaning if that pitcher can go 4 or 5 or 6 mile an hour faster or slower than the previous pitch, we're going to struggle. So what does that mean at all? Let me see this, and this is my artistic work. And let's go ahead and let's take a 13-year-old that throws pretty well, right? And we're going to say that 13-year-old throws pretty well, and we're going to say he throws 70 miles an hour, okay? As the little secret here is, as that ball starts to work towards the inside, for every 6 inches, I'm going to just erase that out. For every 6 inches, it's about a mile per hour. Okay, and a lot of this work comes from Perry Husband, so I do always want to credit Perry because he's been phenomenal with how we go about doing these things. So as that ball starts to reach to the inside corner, it starts to feel like 72, okay? And the same happens when it goes up. So up and in increases velocities. As the ball goes up, same thing. For every 6 inches, we gain a mile an hour. So we start to look at 72 up here. But in and up right in here starts to feel like 74 to a right-handed hitter. Okay, and then conversely, as I move away, it appears to lose a mile an hour, and as I go down, it appears to lose a mile an hour. So at the bottom, it's 68, and over here in the corner, it starts to feel like 66. Okay, right here, 68, okay? So on the diagonal, it always stays the same. It gains as it gets in, but it loses as it moves down. So I have 70 down and in. Away, it It gains as I move up, but it loses as I move away. So anywhere along that diagonal line to a right-hand hitter, 70 is 70. And that should help explain some of our issues that we're having. Okay, so here it is. Here's our gap. As we're looking, that gap is an 8-mile-an-hour gap. Now we can begin to understand why we're having some issues as young hitters, why we're getting a little early or a little late. Now, if we remember, the brain's always going to remember the most recent experience, okay? And so, if I threw the ball up and in, well, I'm going to speed my brain up. I'm going to speed my bat up. Then I come away on an outside pitch. You've sped up, but I've slowed down as a pitcher. Okay, so now that's how I can create that gap, and that's how I can give you a hard time. Okay, so that becomes, this is the backdrop to what we're talking about. And to a degree, this is what is known as effective velocity. And effective velocity, like gravity, it exists. We see the results of it, although we can't actually see it. Okay, but it's there and exists. This was one pitch. That was just one pitch. If this young pitcher had a curveball, and let's say it was at 66, well, when you start to get down here, that's starting to look like 62. Now all of a sudden, they've created a 12-mile-an-hour gap. That's why we've had some issues. So today, when we start talking about the blueprint, this is the area that I want you to remember, the area that I want you to always come back to, and hopefully you'll begin to understand perhaps why some of the issues aren't mechanical at all, okay? And we'll get into that in just a little bit. You see, hitting is extremely involved. It requires vision, timing, physical efficiency, and by the way, this is typically where most people go and work, but notice it's just one of several areas that a hitter is actually working in. This is where you're looking at how you make your swing, okay? It's about mental flexibility, it's about strategy, and it's about nuance and feel. And what we have to be able to do is we take all of those items, and I would call all of that body timing, okay, borrowing a phrase from Perry. I would call that body timing, and we have to marry that to the pitch, okay? And that is what hitting is about, okay? So for me, are there swing inefficiencies? Sure. We do have to have an idea, like a primer as to how I want to make a swing, what makes a proper swing, right? Because obviously, with efficiency, that buys us some other areas where we can have some room for error. And, probably what is really stunning is you get about 1,000th of a second to figure this out, okay? So when a hitter or a coach or a parent realizes, hey, there's two timings going on, and I have to learn how to marry my swing to that pitch timing, and there could be various pitches, that is a completely different idea than that idea that it's only in the swing. And so what happens, what our typical instruction, what traditional instruction has been teaching us, has led to some common frustrations. We've got a lot of players who look really good, but are very inconsistent with their swings, right? They look really good, but can't hit, right? And those frustrations lead to chasing gimmicks, like the latest launch angle, the latest way to go about making the physical swing again. And trust me, there are some tremendous instructors when it comes out to understanding the efficiency of the swing, okay? But sometimes we start chasing gimmicks, okay? We start copying. We get on the internet, we start looking at videos of other players, and we try to emulate the things that they're doing. We're trying to copy what they're doing. But that sort of denies who I am as an individual, okay? So God has made us all each different. So what works for one hitter may not work for me just because of physical structural differences, right? I might put my swing together completely different because of the way that my muscles have developed. Okay, and that's what I want to talk about. So it leads to copying, which could lead to some issues. It leads me to start comparing myself to others. Well, if I'm not careful here, I could create some issues. Well, my best buddy, who is 6'4", 225, he hits a lot harder than I do at 5'10", 175. Okay, so I have to be very careful. What am I comparing to? Okay, and we'll talk about that when we get into the blueprint, but that's a pretty dangerous area to go to. And then competing, right? The idea of competing and who I'm competing against. At the end of the day, I'm competing with myself. I have to understand what it is I'm trying to do when I'm hitting. And so those three are very dangerous to us. And what ends up happening is we end up wasting. We end up wasting time. We end up wasting money. We're chasing things around. We never begin to understand what it is that I'm doing as a hitter. Okay? So this is the background. And if you're ready, let's hop in to the blueprint. Players to play free, to not think, to recognize and act, okay? So the difference here, when I start looking at mechanics versus strategy, okay, so I have my notes with me. I'll get them out of the way, and I have them down here on a platform here. The truth is, you know, when I'm doing this, mechanics teaches me the how. It teaches me body position. It teaches me where my barrel is, what is my swing path, okay? And it helps me create particular movement patterns, okay? It really preps a hitter to execute the physical action of a swing. It has nothing to do with real in-game situations, okay? We've all seen it. We've all seen it when the player is there and the ball is faster than they expected. They yank the hands in and they're getting jammed. Conversely, when it's the off-speed pitch and they even know it's coming, they see this particular shape and then they're reaching, their butts might fly out a little bit. And yet we've never practiced those swings. Okay, so how important is the brain? How powerful is the brain and how it's trying to get us to perform a task? And a lot of that begins with the idea that we've always asked the brain to barrel the baseball. And so when we see the jam or the extended swing, that's the brain saying, hey, let's get the barrel over to the baseball, okay? And so those are the things that start to happen. Well, strategy is the when and the what, okay? It's about patterns that we see from pitchers. And these are all a part of what will be in the hitter's blueprint. It's about pitch recognition. And it's not so much that kids understand that there is a shape. What they fail to understand is shapes don't get you out. It's the speed of shapes that get us out. It is the speed of the shapes when they're sequenced, as we talked about earlier, that can exploit the speed gap. That's what begins to give us some trouble, okay? And so understanding the how and the when to swing, the strategy becomes very specific to situations. So a hitter needs to understand this part, okay? So this is everything. And now, as I've promised before, but now for real, let's get into the actual blueprint. Before we do, one last aside, I have a copy here of my blueprints. What I want you to be able to do, if you haven't yet, just go ahead, go into the description. Please I think you might have to just put in your email or whatever, and you can download the PDF because you have to access, I don't know if it's Dropbox or wherever I have it, I'm not sure. Might be Google Drive, but you have to access that. And so you'll be able to go in there, just fill out your name. It's real quick. You'll get the PDF. It's going to list the entire blueprint. And that's what we're going to talk about, okay, right now. Okay, so let's get into the blueprint. When we begin, I'll start in this stage, and I'll call this stage the on deck. And this is where a hitter is trying to become mentally and physically prepared. Meaning, mentally, right? This hitter doesn't need to understand what it is they exactly do or do not do correctly or incorrectly. That's the process that we're going to go through to see what works for each individual, because just the way that we move, no one can ever copy another swing. We can look at attributes of swings and maybe integrate them into what we're doing, but this is the idea here where we're beginning to develop that process, where we are trying to understand the difference between strategy and chasing the next bouncing red ball, okay, that perhaps some major league ball player is using, okay? And we have to be very, very aware of that. We alluded to that earlier when we talked about copying and comparing. And so we want to make sure that we are working with what works for me, okay? And this is a place where curiosity is going to reign, where we're trying to figure out just exactly what does work for me. Yes, and there are some physical laws that will apply here on how we want to make swings become their most efficient, okay? So that would be on the mental side. On the physical side, we're talking about, do I have baseballs? Do I have a tee? Do I have a place where I can hit? Do I have a batting net? Do I have an L screen? Am I going over to the ball field? Do I have a notebook where I'm taking my notes? Is my camera function on my phone, is it working correctly? All of these items, we want to make sure that are in working order and that I'm prepared to go, because I don't want to be scrambling around. Obviously, over the course of time, we're always adding tools to the toolbox, but this is the phase where I'm getting ready to step out and do all these things. So in this stage, some of the milestones, and if you take the opportunity, go into the description area. I'll list some links to some areas where you can get started as to what this means, how did we get here video, all of that goes into a little more depth. So in this stage, one of the action items is to help us answer questions, okay? It's to establish where am I at right now. And so to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to take an assessment of my swing, and then we're also going to do a tee exit velocity test, okay? So where we'll take some swings, just trying to find out where am I right now. And that's going to help me to establish what my next steps are, okay? So that's it right now for the on deck stage. What I would tell you is, if you have questions, please just go into the description area. There'll be some other links in there, okay? Just know this becomes very necessary, and this is the first stage. This is where we begin to train that physical swing. It's what I would call swing school, level 1 swing school. And in that area of those 7 physical attributes, we're going to work on what leverage is, how we go about creating it, how we utilize it for good, what slack pull is, how we create good tension in swings. We talk about forward momentum or forward movement, okay, first moves, which way we want them to be directed, sweet spot awareness, okay, obviously, barreling baseballs and having feels and trust for where the barrel is in space and time, absorption, which one of us can't spell, absorption where we're trying to get as much energy out of the swing as possible, not soaking up energy. And then we put all of those 5 elements together and we create what is referred to as body timing, how we put our swing together. And then we begin this idea of pitch timing, how we take our swing and marry it to the pitch. And to do that, we use a particular timing technique.
okay? These are the items that we are using when we're in this stage, at this first base stage. So what becomes pretty good about this stage here is the idea that we're trying to create 100% efficiency in my swing. Now, I don't need to be 100% efficient, but I do need to be able to make a good swing. So you take your time, you spend your time with the ability to create the mastery of your swing, okay? So we want that idea to sink in. How do I go about making a good first move? And so here's where again, once again, just go into the description areas. There'll be areas that you can link into other videos that speak specifically for each of these, okay? And some of the drawbacks that can happen, and how to, some of the things, troubleshooting that we would look at. Okay, the other part of this is now we begin to control our thoughts, the intent of what it is that we're trying to do, and most certainly our emotions when we're at the plate. This is stage 2, which I refer to as being at first base. So through the first 2 stages of the blueprint, we're talking about laying the foundation, using our timing technique, and beginning to understand that there is certainly a place for efficiency in how to make a swing, but that's only a part of the equation, okay? And so now when we get into the next phase, it's the stage that I would call second base. Here's where hitters begin to understand we can only do one thing. And that one thing is to figure out what it is that I'm trying to hit, to understand what does it mean to get my pitch. And when I do this, I begin to understand that I need to identify 3 pieces. In order to do only one thing, I have to identify 3 pieces. That is the shape, the effective velocity of it, and the location. Because in this stage, hitters will begin to understand the differentials in the speed zone. If you recall at the very, very beginning of our piece here today, I talked about the speed gap. Well, this is where we go into depth as to how that happens and why it happens and how we overcome that, okay? Here's where we begin to hunt pitches, hunt what we're looking for, okay, rather than reacting, okay? By its nature, hitting is a reactionary event, meaning we don't control the pitch and such. However, we are going to begin to hunt, to begin to understand the pitcher sequencing and where I need to be with the barrel of my bat for me to be successful. This is also the same stage where hitters begin to ID shapes. And I am very fond of saying, shapes don't get you out, but the speed of shapes do. And here's where we begin to become very deliberate about IDing shapes, because when we see that shape, I want that to equate to a particular velocity. Shapes equal speed, okay? And that becomes very important here. This is an area where a hitter is going to want to use their eyes, understanding what that means. And it's also where we are deliberately applying that timing technique that we introduced back at first base, okay? So at this point, this is where it doesn't surprise me that hitters will start to go back to first base. Maybe they'll even take a look at being on deck, just like, oh yeah, now I can go back and revise what it is I'm trying to do. I think we're starting to get good answers here. And again, some of those action items are right here, okay? Also in this stage, we're still going over. We're always going to work on 1 or 2 of those physical attributes from first base. And so a hitter will always visit those, okay? But here's where we're going to spend most of our time when we're at second base. So as the player continues to develop their swing, we enter this third phase, which I would call third base, the third base phase. And here is where if a hitter's going to struggle, This is typically where it happens because they've done exceptionally well. This is where I think mechanics fail us, right? Because again, the mechanics is the how, it's not the what or the when. Well, this is the what or the when, okay? And this is where we learn how to transfer our results and our training into game situations. This is where we're implementing that. This is where we're starting to create feedback loops. And in this phase, a hitter is going to continue to work on all of those items that they were using at second base. This is where they are talking about doing only one thing, how to read a pitch, how to flush out from pitch to pitch, flush out their mind so that they're always reestablishing the timing that they're looking for by utilizing that timing technique. This is what's happening here at third base. And to help us to implement that, we begin to utilize variability training. And the idea of becoming uncomfortable the idea of becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable. Okay, so we'll create some ideas here. You'll get some ideas. You can create your own, more so. But here's where we might integrate bazoo balls, mattresses, anything that makes a hitter become uncomfortable. It could be just blocking one eye. It could be using different weighted ball bats. Any of these things that allow a hitter to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's what happens in games, okay? And so we delve a lot into that mental idea, that mental process that goes on, and then we're establishing those feedback loops, okay? So that is what we're doing at third base. Okay, here's where all of those previous stages are leading us to understand our movement and awareness. It's allowing us to optimize our attractors, those attractors being emotional, the central nervous system, the mental, muscular activities that are going on when hitting. This is almost like the rabbit hole for hitters, okay? Because they're feeling very comfortable and now they're trying to find, are there other ways that can help me find even a higher gear? Okay, so this becomes a wonderful area. We like to spend a lot of time in here. When we're in this phase, hitters are definitely hunting sequences. They definitely understand what it is they are attempting to do from pitch to pitch. They're sliding in and out of that really easily. Everything that's happening here is self-adjusting, okay? Any of their questions is probably built around the idea of timing prep, self-awarenesses, okay? So these become some really fun and interesting questions that they're asking or seeking help with, okay? And what happens when a hitter starts to become really immersed in these areas, they have created some emotional stability. They're very confident, so we don't have to go from at-bat to at-bat, you know, with judgment. These are very non-judgmental players, and they are getting results, okay? But they begin to understand how it is that they've created those results, so they know exactly what's going on. They're definitely immersed in deliberate practice. There's continuous measurement going on by this point. There's definitely a buy-in. And when I say continuous measurement, it's what is appropriate for each individual. Okay, so some of these are actual physical measurements, some of these are mental measurements, some of these are emotional measurements. Okay, so this becomes a complete blueprint. This is what I would be looking at when I'm beginning to construct my swing. Okay, and so too many times players are just, you know, we think we have an issue and we hop online and we pull up a video and then we sort of slide over here and we're looking at this video, and then next thing you know, we've wasted time and we're no further along than if we would have just settled down at the very, very beginning, thought a little bit about the process, and began working on it. Okay, so thank you for joining me. I mean, this is a long video here today, but I wanted to say, hey, thank you for joining me. We've had a lot of success. So if you're trying to figure out where you are along the path, or you want to see the action items that go on with each of these phases, if you would like, in that description box, boy, that description box has been mentioned a lot today. Hey, if you want to, please just go in there, register for the masterclass. That will be coming up. I'll notify you as to when it is. It will be recorded and it's there. But if you want more information, please just go ahead. The blueprint is there. It's got some notes as to the things that we've discussed today. And then the masterclass is going to describe the action items for the blueprint. Okay, so it will be a little bit more intensive as to actual work items. Okay, and that should come up in just a couple of weeks. Okay, and I'll keep you posted via the email. All right. Hey, I really thank you for helping me out. If you thought this was worthwhile, please give me a thumb up. If you have questions, go ahead, just put them in the comments. You may always email me. My email address is in that description area. So thank you so much. Look forward to talking to you very soon. Take care.